You've had a long day. Maybe you've been moving quickly, thinking rapidly, responding to demands. That's done now. You're here, and here you can rest. Tonight, we're going to slow down together, moving at a different pace entirely. We're going to drift through the life of a glacier, where time stretches across centuries and millennia, where movement happens so slowly you wouldn't perceive it if you watched. There's nothing to learn, nothing to remember, just a gentle journey through ice and time. Tonight, you're going to experience the journey of ice, from its first moment as a snowflake to its eventual return to water, thousands of years later. You're beginning high in the mountains, in the thin, cold air above a vast glacier. It's night, and the sky is perfectly clear, filled with more stars than you've ever seen. The temperature is far below freezing, and the air is so still you can hear the silence itself. This is a journey that moves slowly, very slowly, at a pace that has nothing to do with human time. There's no rush here, nothing demanding your attention, just the peaceful, patient unfolding of natural processes that take centuries to complete. The mountains rise around you in dark silhouettes against the star-filled sky. They're ancient, these peaks, worn and shaped by ice over millions of years. The glacier below stretches through the valley like a frozen river, white in the starlight, marked with subtle shadows and textures. It's been here for thousands of years, this glacier, flowing slowly down from the heights, carrying ice and time in its slow descent. And tonight, you're going to join it. You're going to become part of its journey. You find yourself becoming smaller, lighter, until you're no longer standing on solid ground, but forming in the clouds above. You're a snowflake now, a tiny crystal of ice, forming around a microscopic particle of dust that has drifted through the atmosphere for who knows how long. The transformation happens slowly, water vapor freezing molecule by molecule around this ancient speck. The air is cold enough, far below freezing, and the water vapor in the cloud is supersaturated, ready to crystallize. You grow arms, delicate and symmetrical, each one branching in patterns that mirror the others. There's no hurry to this formation. Each molecule finds its place in the crystal lattice, patient and precise. The growth happens layer by layer, the ice crystal building itself according to the temperature and humidity of the cloud around you. The shape that emerges is unique. No two snowflakes ever form exactly the same pattern, but it follows rules, mathematical principles that govern how water molecules bond in frozen form. The 6 arms extend at precise angles from your center, each one growing at the same rate, each one developing the same branching pattern. It's a beautiful symmetry. This snowflake form, elegant and complex and entirely natural. And now you're beginning to fall, not quickly, not dramatically, but in a gentle descent through the cold night air. You drift down slowly, very slowly, turning as you fall, catching occasional currents that lift you slightly before releasing you again. The air is so still that your fall is almost perfectly vertical, with only the slightest drift to one side or the other. Below you, the glacier spreads across the mountain valley, a river of white that flows so slowly it appears completely still. You can see its surface, textured with old snow, marked with subtle blue shadows where the starlight catches the ice. You're falling toward this surface, but the journey takes time. There's no rush. Minutes pass, perhaps many minutes, and you're still falling, still drifting down through the cold mountain darkness. Other snowflakes fall with you, thousands of them, millions, each one descending at its own pace through the quiet darkness. Some drift beside you for a while, then catch different air currents and spiral away. Others appear from above, passing you gently, their delicate forms visible in the starlight for a moment before they disappear below. The air is so cold it feels almost solid, almost crystalline itself. You turn slowly as you fall, and the stars wheel around you, patient and distant. They've been there for billions of years. These stars, shining their light across space, and they'll be there for billions more. Your fall is just a tiny moment in comparison, but it's your moment, peaceful and unhurried. You can sense the cold around you, how it preserves your crystalline form, keeps your arms intact and delicate. In warmer air, you might begin to melt, to lose your intricate structure. But here, in the deep cold of the high mountains, you remain perfect, frozen, your pattern preserved exactly as it formed in the cloud. The temperature is perhaps 20 or 30 degrees below zero, cold enough to keep water solidly frozen, cold enough to preserve ice indefinitely. You're still falling, and now you can see more detail in the glacier below. You can see where previous snowfalls have left layers, where the surface rises and falls in gentle waves. You can see, far in the distance, where the glacier begins at the high peaks and where it flows down valley, disappearing into darkness. But you're not thinking about where it goes. You're just falling, slowly, peacefully, through the cold mountain night. The air moves past you gently, or perhaps you move through the air. It's hard to tell which. Everything is relative when you're this small, this light, this caught in the steady descent. Time moves differently here. Your fall might take minutes or hours. There's no way to measure it, no way to know. The stars don't move noticeably. The glacier below doesn't change. You just continue your gentle descent, turning slowly, drifting down through air so cold and clear it feels like you're falling through crystal. The darkness around you is complete except for the starlight. And that starlight is enough to see by, enough to illuminate the world in shades of silver and shadow. And gradually, imperceptibly, you're getting closer to the surface. You can see individual features now. The way the old snow has been shaped by wind, the small ridges and hollows. You can see where other snowflakes have already landed, adding to the surface layer by layer, each snowfall contributing its small addition to the glacier's mass. The glacier has been here for thousands of years, and it will be here for thousands more. Your arrival is just one small moment in that vast span of time. One snowflake among countless billions that have fallen and will fall, each one adding its tiny mass to the immense body of ice. You're very close now, just a few feet above the surface, and you can see the texture of the snow crystals already there, how they interlock, how they catch the starlight. Each crystal is unique, like you, each one a small work of art created by the physics of freezing water. They lie there in layers, previous snowfalls preserved in the cold, waiting to be compressed, to be transformed into ice, to begin their own long journey through the glacier. You drift down the last few inches, turning one final time, and then, gently, so gently, you come to rest on the glacier's surface. There's no impact, no sound. You simply settle among the other crystals, finding a place among them, your arms interlocking with theirs, forming a loose matrix of ice and air. The journey of falling is complete, but the glacier's journey, your journey through ice and time, is just beginning. You've landed near the glacier's accumulation zone, high in the mountains where more snow falls each winter than melts each summer. This is the region where the glacier grows, where it gains mass, where snow accumulates year after year, decade after decade, century after century. You'll stay here, in this position, through the rest of this night, through the coming dawn, through all the days and nights that follow. Above you, more snowflakes continue to fall. Slowly, endlessly, they settle on top of you, around you, covering you gradually. There's no rush to this burial. Each snowflake takes its time finding its place. But gradually, so gradually, you're being covered, joined by more and more crystals, becoming part of a layer. A season's snowfall, one annual addition to the glacier's vast accumulation of time. The weight of these new flakes is negligible at first, barely perceptible, but as more fall, as the layer deepens, the weight begins to add up. Slowly, slowly, you're being pressed down. The crystals below you supporting your weight and the weight of all the snow above. You're resting now on the glacier's surface, one snowflake among countless others, and the night continues around you in perfect stillness. The stars wheel slowly overhead, so slowly you don't perceive their movement. The temperature is deeply cold, the kind of cold that preserves, that keeps everything exactly as it is. There's no wind, no movement in the air, just absolute stillness and the weight of cold pressing down from the dark sky. You're part of a layer now, the winter's snowfall, settling gently onto all the winters that came before. Below you, meters and meters of old snow and ice, each layer representing a year, a season, a series of storms that brought snow to the mountains. Above you, the open sky, vast and clear, and the continuing gentle fall of new snow. Days pass, then weeks, and you remain here, patient and still. More snow falls during some nights, and those new flakes settle on top of you, adding their weight, their presence. The accumulation is gradual, not dramatic. One storm might bring a few centimeters of new snow. Another might bring more. Occasionally, a week passes with no new snow at all, and the existing surface is exposed to the sun and stars, settling slowly under its own weight. During the days, the sun rises over the high peaks, and its light touches the glacier's surface, making the snow crystals sparkle, each one catching and reflecting the light. The whole surface of the glacier glitters like a field of diamonds, endless white stretching across the valley. But this high on the mountain, even the summer sun isn't warm enough to melt you. The temperature rises slightly during the day, approaching 0 perhaps, but not quite reaching it. Then at night, it falls again, returning to deep cold, and the snow remains frozen, preserved. You're becoming part of what glaciologists call the névé, that transitional layer between fresh snow and true glacier ice. It's a slow transformation, one that takes years, decades. There's no hurry, no pressure except the gentle weight of new snow accumulating above. The weight of new snow above you presses down, gently but constantly. The pressure isn't uncomfortable. It's steady, patient, inevitable. You're being compressed, very slowly, your delicate arms beginning to lose their intricate shapes, your crystals beginning to pack more closely together. The air spaces between you and neighboring snowflakes are closing gradually, squeezed by the weight from above. Around you, other snowflakes are experiencing the same gradual change. The layer you're part of is becoming denser, heavier, more compact. Air spaces between the crystals are growing smaller as the weight from above presses everything together. But this is happening so slowly. Years pass. A year is nothing to a glacier, just one small increment in its vast lifespan. Seasons cycle above you. Winter snows adding more weight. Spring and summer sun warming the surface slightly but not reaching down to where you rest. Autumn bringing the first new snows of the next winter cycle. You're meters below the surface now, buried under subsequent years of snowfall. And the pressure continues, steady and calm. The darkness around you is not complete. Light filters down through the layers above, giving everything a soft white glow. But it's dim, peaceful, like twilight that never ends. The névé has a particular quality, something between snow and ice. It's denser than fresh snow, more packed, but not yet the solid blue ice of the glacier's deeper layers. If you could look at it closely, you'd see crystals that are rounder than fresh snowflakes. Their sharp edges worn away by the pressure and slight melting and refreezing that happens even in the cold. The névé is granular, each grain representing what was once an individual snowflake, or part of one, now compressed and simplified. The structure is still porous, still containing significant airspace, but less than fresh snow, much less. The transformation is ongoing, gradual, patient. Light still penetrates down to where you are, filtered through the layers above, giving everything a soft white glow. The quality of this light changes with the seasons. In summer, when the sun is high and strong, more light reaches you, and the glow around you brightens noticeably. You can almost sense the warmth of the sun, though it doesn't reach down to where you rest. Not enough to melt anything, not enough to change the deep cold. In winter, when the days are short and the sun low, the light dims and the cold deepens. The temperature drops further, perhaps 10 or 20 degrees below zero, and everything becomes more still, more frozen. If that's possible, you can sense the crystals around you, how they're all slowly changing together, how the layer is settling, compacting, becoming something new without ever rushing the transformation. The process is mechanical, driven by gravity and pressure, but it's also almost organic, a natural progression from one state to another. Snow becomes névé, becomes ice, each stage flowing naturally into the next, each transformation taking its required time. There's a rhythm to it, though the rhythm is too slow to perceive directly. It's the rhythm of geological time, of processes that unfold across decades and centuries. Time passes, and you don't count it. There's no way to mark the years, no way to measure the decades. You simply exist in this state of gradual change, feeling the pressure from above, feeling yourself being slowly compressed into something denser, more permanent. The weight of all the snow accumulated above you is substantial now, tens of meters of it, maybe more, but the pressure is distributed evenly, peacefully. It's like a blanket, heavy and constant, holding you in place, pressing you down into the névé layer below, which is pressed into the ice layer below that. Everything compressed under the accumulated weight of years and years of snowfall. Sometimes you're aware of subtle shifts in temperature. The seasons above, far from where you rest, create slight variations that travel slowly down through the layers. Warmer in summer, colder in winter, But the changes are muted, gentle. This deep in the neve, the temperature stays below freezing always, preserving everything, keeping the transformation gradual and patient. The warmth of a summer day at the surface becomes just a slight easing of the cold by the time it reaches you, barely noticeable. The deep cold of a winter night adds just a bit more cold to what's already there. The temperature might vary by 5 degrees through the year at your depth, no more. The crystals that were once your delicate arms are changing shape now, becoming more rounded, pressed together with neighboring crystals. The transformation is happening at the molecular level. Water molecules rearranging themselves, finding new positions, creating a denser structure. Air bubbles trapped between flakes when you first landed are being compressed into smaller pockets. But they're still there, tiny spaces holding ancient mountain air from the year you fell. These bubbles will stay with you for thousands of years, preserving a sample of the atmosphere from your time. They hold oxygen and nitrogen and carbon dioxide in the same proportions as the air had that year. A tiny record of the world above, sealed in ice. Around you, the neve extends in all directions. Above, more layers continue to accumulate, year after year, each winter adding its contribution. Each spring and summer settling and compacting what fell during the cold months. Below, older neve gradually transforms into true glacier ice under even greater pressure. You're in the middle layers, experiencing the ongoing transition, becoming part of the glacier's body slowly, peacefully, without resistance. There's no fighting this process, no trying to remain as you were. The transformation is natural, inevitable, part of the cycle that creates glaciers and keeps them flowing. The light that filters down to you is diffuse and gentle, scattered through the overlying snow and neve. During the summer months above, when the sun shines on the glacier's surface, more light reaches you, and everything around you glows with a soft white luminescence. The light is gentle, not harsh, filtered through meters of snow and ice until it's soft and even. During the winter darkness, less light penetrates, and you rest in a deeper twilight, quiet and still, but you're always in some degree of light, never in complete darkness. The snow and neve scatter and reflect illumination even from the stars, even from the faint glow of moonlight on those nights when the moon rises over the peaks. More time passes, and the passage of time becomes abstract, meaningless in any conventional sense. A year is just one cycle among countless others. A decade is barely noticeable. The compression continues at its patient pace, and you become denser, more compact, more integrated with the material around you. The pressure from above grows slowly as more snow accumulates, year after year, adding to the weight, increasing the compression. But you become stronger too, more able to support that weight. As your structure changes from delicate snowflake to compact neve, you're denser now than when you first arrived, your structure more compact, more integrated with the surrounding material, but you're still distinct in some ways, still holding those tiny air bubbles, still part of a layer that marks a specific time, a specific series of snowfalls from decades ago. The glacier keeps this record, layer upon layer, each one slightly different in density, in the size of crystals, in the chemistry of the snow that fell. A warm year creates slightly different snow than a cold year. A dry year creates drier snow with more airspace. A wet year creates wetter, denser snow. These differences are preserved in the layers, readable, if one knows how to look, interpretable if one has the tools and knowledge. And slowly, very slowly, you're beginning to move. Not because you're choosing to, but because the glacier itself is moving. Under the pressure of all the accumulated ice and snow, the glacier flows downslope, pulled by gravity so gently that the movement is imperceptible from day to day, from month to month, even from year to year. But it's there, constant and patient. You're part of this flow now, being carried along with the neve around you, beginning your journey down the mountain at a pace measured in inches per year, perhaps a meter or two at most. The movement is so slow that if you could watch a single point on the glacier, it would appear completely stationary unless you watched for years, for decades. The movement is smooth, without jerks or sudden shifts. You're not sliding on something, but flowing through something. The ice around you deforming plastically under pressure, changing shape minutely, creeping downslope grain by grain, crystal by crystal. There's no sensation of speed because there is no speed, not in any way you could perceive. Just patient, geological movement, as slow as stone, as gradual as mountains rising. The entire glacier is moving this way, from the highest accumulation zones down to the terminus far below, all of it flowing together like a river, but a river that takes centuries to travel the distance a water river would cover in days. The flow is driven by gravity, by the weight of the ice itself, by the accumulated mass of thousands of years of snowfall, all pressing downward and downslope. The ice at the surface moves fastest, least constrained by friction. The ice at the bottom moves slowest, dragging against the bedrock. You're somewhere in between these extremes, in the middle layers, moving at a moderate pace. But moderate for a glacier is still incredibly slow by human standards. You might travel a few meters this year, a few meters next year. In a decade, perhaps 50 meters. In a century, perhaps a kilometer. If that, the journey down the valley will take many human lifetimes, many generations. But you're not in a hurry. Neither is the ice around you. Time moves differently here in the neve, in the slow transformation toward true glacier ice. Time continues its slow passage, and you continue your gradual transformation. The weight above you has increased over the years, the decades. More snow has fallen. More neve has accumulated, and the pressure compressing you downward has grown stronger, though still patient, still gentle. You're deeper in the glacier now, tens of meters below the surface, perhaps 40 or 50 meters down, buried under all those subsequent years of accumulation. The weight is substantial. Tons and tons of snow and ice pressing down from above. But the pressure is distributed evenly across your entire structure, so it's bearable, peaceful even. And the neve around you is becoming something else, transitioning toward true glacier ice. The transformation is subtle, happening in increments too small to notice from moment to moment, from day to day, even from year to year. The airspaces between you and neighboring crystals are growing smaller and smaller as the weight forces everything together, compressing the porous neve into denser material. Those delicate boundaries between individual snowflakes are disappearing, being replaced by a more unified structure. You're becoming part of the ice itself. Your identity as a separate crystal, merging with the whole, your structure integrating with the surrounding matrix. It's not a loss. This merging, it's a transformation, a becoming, a transition into something new and permanent. The color of the light around you is changing. Where once the glow was purely white, filtered through snow. Now there's a hint of blue beginning to emerge. This is the blue of deep glacier ice, the color that comes from the way dense ice absorbs and scatters light, taking in the red wavelengths and reflecting the blue. It's a pale blue now, barely perceptible, just a tint in the whiteness. But as the years continue and the pressure increases, this blue will deepen, becoming more pronounced, more beautiful. The blue is subtle at first, so subtle you might not notice it if you weren't paying attention. But it's there, growing more distinct season by season, decade by decade. You can sense the ice crystals around you growing larger, reorienting, aligning with the stress patterns created by the glacier's flow. Individual crystals are merging, their boundaries disappearing, creating larger grains. Where once there were thousands of tiny neve grains surrounding you, now there are hundreds of larger ice crystals, and over more time, there will be dozens of even larger ones. The ice is becoming more uniform, more cohesive. The structure is simplifying, organizing itself, finding the most stable configuration under the prevailing conditions of pressure and temperature and stress. But the process is slow, measured in years and decades, not days or hours. Each tiny change happens patiently, without forcing, without rushing. The air bubbles you've carried since your arrival are still present, but they're smaller now, compressed by the weight of ice above. They're round, these bubbles, tiny spheres of ancient air trapped in the ice matrix, no longer the irregular shapes they had in the neve. The pressure has forced them into the most efficient form, the sphere, which distributes stress most evenly. Light catches them sometimes, making them sparkle faintly in the growing blue glow, little points of brightness in the ice. They'll travel with you through your entire journey through the glacier. These small capsules of atmosphere from the year you fell as snow. Some glaciers preserve ice that's hundreds of thousands of years old, and that ice still contains air bubbles from when it fell, still preserves samples of ancient atmospheres. Your bubbles are much younger, only decades old, but they'll last as long as you remain frozen, as long as the ice holds together. Around you, the glacier extends in all directions, vast and solid. Above, the neve continues through many meters, gradually transitioning back to snow at the surface, far overhead. The layers are visible. If one could see them, annual bands marking each year's snowfall. Thicker bands from heavy snow years, thinner bands from dry years. Below, the ice is denser, older, compressed over even longer periods. Some of that ice fell as snow a century ago, perhaps more, and it's become solid, cohesive glacier ice, blue and strong. To your sides, the glacier is hundreds of meters wide, a vast river of ice flowing slowly through the mountain valley. You're part of this immense body now, becoming more integrated with it every year, more indistinguishable from the whole. The movement continues, imperceptible but constant. You're flowing downslope, carried by the glacier's plastic deformation, moving perhaps a few meters per year, perhaps more. The exact rate depends on many factors: the slope of the valley, the thickness of the ice, the temperature, the amount of meltwater at the base. But whatever the rate, it's slow, measured in geological time. The motion is smooth, without turbulence, without variation. The ice around you moves at the same pace you do, all of it flowing together, a unified mass creeping down the valley so slowly that from the outside, from a human time scale, it would appear completely motionless. If someone were to stand on the glacier's surface and watch, they would see no movement at all. They could watch for hours, for days, and perceive no change. Only by placing markers and returning years later could they measure the flow, see how far the ice has traveled. Sometimes, very rarely, you're aware of subtle sounds, not loud sounds, not sudden ones, but deep, low creaks and groans as the ice adjusts to the stresses within it. These sounds travel through the glacier slowly, resonating through the ice, creating vibrations that pass through you gently. They're the sounds of the glacier moving, of ice crystals sliding past each other minutely, of the entire frozen river flexing and flowing under its own weight. The sounds are deep, bass notes that rumble through the ice, felt as much as heard. They come irregularly, sometimes separated by hours or days of silence, sometimes coming in groups as the glacier adjusts to some change in stress or temperature or flow pattern. The pressure around you is substantial now. Not painful. Ice doesn't feel pain, but present, constant, undeniable. It's the weight of all the snow and ice accumulated above you. Perhaps 50 meters of it now, perhaps more. This pressure is what's transforming you from neve into ice. What's compressing the air bubbles? What's making the ice denser and stronger and more cohesive? But the pressure is even, distributed across all directions, pushing from above and from the sides and from below. And so it's peaceful in its constancy. The ice can support this pressure, can bear this weight. That's what ice does. It's strong in compression, able to hold immense loads without failing. Seasons pass above, far from where you rest. Summer sun warms the surface, melting a little of the topmost snow, creating meltwater that percolates down a small distance before refreezing. Winter cold brings new snowfalls, adding more weight, more pressure. The cycle repeats year after year, each summer slightly different from the last, each winter bringing its own particular pattern of storms and accumulation. But these seasonal cycles barely affect you at this depth. Your temperature remains stable, several degrees below freezing, held constant by the insulating layers above and the deep cold stored in the glacier's mass. You're in an environment that changes on geological time, not seasonal time. The temperature might vary by a degree through the year. No more. A tiny fluctuation in an otherwise constant cold. The blue light around you is more pronounced now. You're definitely ice now, no longer neve. Though the transition was so gradual, you couldn't pinpoint when it happened. There was no moment when you suddenly became ice instead of neve. It was a continuum, a smooth progression from one state to the other, and somewhere along that continuum, you crossed an invisible threshold. The structure around you is solid, cohesive, the crystals large and well formed, fitting together like pieces of a puzzle. The ice is clear in most places, with a transparency that allows light to penetrate deep, creating that characteristic blue glow. Where the air bubbles are concentrated, the ice appears slightly milky, white rather than blue, but mostly you're surrounded by the deep, peaceful blue of ancient glacier ice. This blue is one of the most beautiful colors in nature, pure and vivid, a blue that seems to glow from within. And you continue to flow. The glacier's movement never stops, never pauses. Day and night, summer and winter, the ice creeps downslope, pulled by gravity, deforming under its own weight. The flow is continuous, unceasing, as reliable as the sunrise. You're part of this flow, moving with all the ice around you, journeying slowly through the mountain valley. The movement is so slow that even over a human lifetime, the distance traveled would be modest. A person might watch a particular spot on the glacier for their entire life and see it move only a few hundred meters, perhaps a kilometer at most. But you have more than a human lifetime. You have centuries, perhaps millennia, to complete your journey. Time is abundant when you're ice. Time is endless. The ice above you continues to compress, and you continue to sink deeper relative to the surface. Even as you flow down valley, new snow falls and becomes neve. Neve becomes ice, and you move deeper into the glacier's body. You're perhaps 100 meters below the surface now, deep in the blue ice, part of a layer that fell as snow a century ago, maybe more. The exact time is impossible to know. You've lost track of years, of decades. Time has lost its meaning in any conventional sense. There are no markers, no way to count years, no calendars, no clocks, just the slow, patient transformation and flow, ongoing and endless. Around you, the ice holds its history. Each layer tells a story. If one knows how to read it, what year it fell, what the climate was like, what particles were in the air. A layer of volcanic ash marks an eruption, a thin, dark line in the ice. A layer with higher sulfate concentration marks a year when industrial pollution was high. A layer with more dust marks a dry year when winds carried more particles. These chemical and physical signatures are preserved in the ice, readable by scientists who extract ice cores and analyze them in laboratories. But you're not reading this history. You're being it, experiencing it, moving through it slowly. You're both the record and the recorder, the ice and the journey through ice. Your layer, when it's eventually extracted and analyzed, will tell future researchers something about the year you fell, about the atmosphere that existed then, about the climate and weather patterns of that time. You're deep within the glacier's body now, perhaps 150 meters below the surface, surrounded on all sides by ancient ice. The blue light here is profound, a deep azure that fills everything, creating an environment unlike anywhere else on Earth. Light filters down from the surface far above, but by the time it reaches you, it's been scattered and filtered so many times that only the blue wavelengths remain. Everything glows with this color, soft and peaceful, a perpetual twilight that never brightens or dims noticeably. The blue is everywhere, in every direction, infinite and calming. It's the color of deep water, of clear sky, of sapphires, but purer than any of these, more intense, more saturated. The ice around you is dense and solid, compressed over many decades, perhaps over a century or even longer. The crystals are large now, some of them several centimeters across, their boundaries visible as subtle lines in the blue matrix. These crystals have grown through a process of recrystallization, smaller grains merging into larger ones, the ice reorganizing itself slowly under the pressure and stress of the glacier's flow. The structure is beautiful in its regularity, in the way the crystals align and fit together, creating a cohesive whole. If you could look at a thin section under polarized light, you'd see the crystals as different colors, each one a different orientation, together creating a mosaic of blues and purples and greens. But here in the glacier's depths, you just sense the solidity, the strength, the unity of the ice. The air bubbles you've carried since your arrival are very small now, compressed into tiny spheres by the weight of ice above. The pressure has made them minute, perhaps a fraction of a millimeter in diameter, barely visible, but they're still there, visible as white dots in the blue ice, each one a microscopic sample of the atmosphere from the year you fell. These bubbles are under pressure, the air inside them compressed to several times atmospheric pressure. But the ice holds them safely, preserves them. They'll stay with you for as long as the ice remains solid, little time capsules traveling through the glacier. In very old ice, in ice that's hundreds of thousands of years old, the bubbles become so compressed and the ice so plastic that the bubbles eventually disappear, the air dissolving into the ice crystal structure itself. But you're nowhere near that age yet. Your bubbles are safe, intact, preserved. The pressure here is substantial, the weight of all the ice above pressing down steadily, perhaps 1,000,000 kilograms per square meter, perhaps more. The pressure is immense by human standards, but for ice it's normal, expected. But the pressure is also coming from the sides, from the valley walls that constrain the glacier's flow, from the ice ahead and behind. This creates what's called a stress field, a three-dimensional pattern of forces that shapes how the ice flows. You're aware of these forces, how they push and pull gently from different directions, how they cause the ice to deform, to creep, to flow downslope slowly. The stress isn't uniform. Some directions have more pressure, some less. The ice responds to these differences by flowing, by deforming, by moving from areas of higher stress to areas of lower stress. And the flow continues, constant and patient. You're moving through the valley, carried by the glacier's motion, traveling perhaps 10 meters per year at this depth, perhaps less. The flow is fastest at the surface and slower at depth. Slower near the sides where the valley walls create friction. Faster in the center where the ice can move more freely. You're somewhere in the middle of this flow field, moving at a steady, modest pace through the deep blue world. The flow patterns are complex, three-dimensional, with ice moving not just downslope, but also sideways and vertically, all at different rates, all contributing to the overall motion of the glacier. Time passes, and you have no way to measure it. Days and nights cycle above. Seasons change, years accumulate. But here in the glacier's depths, everything is constant. The temperature never varies more than a fraction of a degree, staying steady at perhaps 15 or 20 degrees below zero. The light stays the same deep blue, unchanging and eternal. The pressure remains steady, unwavering. You exist in a state of timelessness, where change happens on such a slow scale that from moment to moment, everything appears frozen, unchanging. But change is happening. It's always happening. The glacier is flowing, and you're flowing with it. The journey continues, patient and endless. But change is happening. The glacier is flowing, and you're flowing with it. The valley is carrying you downward, down from the high peaks where you fell as snow, down toward lower elevations, toward warmer temperatures, though that warmth is still far away, still many decades or centuries in your future. For now, you're moving through the deepest, coldest part of the glacier, the heart of the ice, where everything is perfectly preserved, perfectly frozen. The ice here might stay solid for thousands of years, tens of thousands even, depending on the glacier's flow rate and the climate above. Around you, the ice extends in all directions for hundreds of meters. Above you, layers upon layers of compressed snow and ice, each one younger than you, each one still making its own journey down through the neve toward the depths where you now rest. Below you, even older ice, compressed over even longer periods. Ice that fell as snow centuries ago, perhaps even longer ago than that. Some glaciers contain ice that's been flowing for thousands of years. Ice from times when the climate was different, when civilizations were just beginning, when the world above was unrecognizable compared to today. To your sides, the glacier is vast. A frozen river hundreds of meters wide, thousands of meters long, all of it moving together in its slow descent. Sometimes you're aware of the ice shifting slightly, adjusting to the stresses within it. These movements are minute, measured in millimeters or less, but they're constant. The ice is plastic at this depth, able to deform without breaking, and it does so continuously, flowing like a very, very slow fluid. You can sense this motion around you, the way crystals slide past each other microscopically, the way grain boundaries migrate, the way the entire mass creeps downward under its own weight. It's a subtle sensation, barely perceptible, but it's there, constant and unending. The ice is always moving, always adjusting, always responding to the forces acting upon it. The blue light that surrounds you has a quality of peace, of deep stillness. It's not a harsh light, not bright or glaring, but soft and diffused, coming from all directions at once. The ice scatters it, bounces it between crystals, between air bubbles, creating a glow that seems to come from within the ice itself. This is the light of the deep glacier, and it will be your environment for a long time yet, for decades or centuries, as you continue your slow journey through the ice. The light has a hypnotic quality, unchanging and eternal, like being suspended in a blue dream that never ends. You're aware, dimly, of the glacier's scale. It extends kilometers behind you, back up the valley to the accumulation zone where you first fell as snow, back to those high peaks and that starlit night when you began this journey. It extends kilometers ahead of you, down the valley toward the terminus, the end of the ice, though that's still very far away, still many decades of flow in your future. The glacier is a massive thing. Thousands of tons of ice, millions of tons, perhaps billions, all of it moving together in a coordinated flow that's been continuing for thousands of years and will continue for thousands more, assuming the climate remains cold enough to sustain it. The ice around you holds stories. If one could read them, layers of volcanic ash from ancient eruptions, incorporated into the snow and preserved in the ice, mark specific years when volcanoes erupted. Layers of dust from dry years when the winds carried more particles tell of drought and climate variation. Layers of clear ice from years of pure snowfall speak of wet. Calm years with little wind, chemical signatures in the ice that tell of past climates, past temperatures. Past atmospheric conditions are locked in the molecular structure, readable by those with the right equipment and knowledge. But you're not observing these stories. You're part of them, moving through them, a piece of the glacier's history traveling through time, carrying your own small record of the atmosphere from the year you fell. And still you flow, carried by the ice, moving downslope at a pace that seems to never change. The glacier is patient beyond human comprehension, beyond human timescales. It moves at the speed of stone, at the speed of geological time, at a pace that makes human lives seem like brief flickers. But it does move, and you move with it, traveling through the deep blue world, surrounded by ice on all sides, compressed and preserved and flowing slowly, slowly down the valley. The journey that began with a single snowflake falling through the night has become something larger, something that transcends individual identity, something that merges you with the glacier itself, with its vast, slow movement through time and space. The journey continues through the glacier's depths, and you continue to flow downslope, carried by the ice's plastic deformation. Decades have passed since you first fell as snow on the glacier's surface. Perhaps a century or more, perhaps longer still. Time has become abstract, unmeasurable, a concept that no longer has much meaning. But the flow is constant, real, physical, and you've traveled kilometers through the valley, moving at that patient, geological pace that never changes noticeably from year to year, from decade to decade. The accumulation of these tiny increments of movement, these centimeters per day, these meters per year, adds up over the vast spans of time to significant distances. The valley through which the glacier flows is curved, not straight, and this creates interesting patterns in the ice flow. Where the valley bends, the ice on the outside of the curve must travel farther than the ice on the inside, and this creates differential flow, variations in speed across the glacier's width. The ice on the outside moves faster to keep up. The ice on the inside moves slower. You're moving through these variations, sometimes speeding up slightly as you pass through a straight section, sometimes slowing as the glacier negotiates a curve. But these variations are subtle, barely perceptible, just minor modifications to the overall slow downslope creep. The difference might be a few centimeters per year, no more, but over centuries these small differences add up, causing the ice to develop patterns, folding patterns that can be seen in the layers when the glacier is examined. The blue light around you remains constant, that deep azure glow that characterizes the glacier's interior. But sometimes, very rarely, you sense changes in the light from far above, seasonal variations that penetrate down even to your depth. Summer light is slightly brighter, warmer in quality if not in actual temperature, carrying a hint of the sun shining on the glacier's surface. Winter light is dimmer, colder, the sun weaker and lower in the sky, the days short. But these variations are subtle, muted by all the ice between you and the surface. The light might brighten or dim by 10% through the year, perhaps less. A subtle cycle that you're barely aware of, but that marks the passage of time in its own way. The ice crystals around you continue their slow evolution. Recrystallization is ongoing, never stopping, a continuous process of reorganization and change. Crystals merging and realigning, responding to the stress field created by the glacier's flow. Some crystals grow larger while others shrink, being absorbed into their neighbors. The boundaries between crystals shift microscopically, rearranging themselves to minimize energy, to find the most stable configuration given the pressures and stresses and temperatures. This is happening constantly but so slowly that the ice appears unchanging, frozen in time. If you could watch a single crystal boundary for a year, you might see it move a few micrometers, no more. But over decades, over centuries, these tiny movements accumulate, and the ice transforms, reorganizes, becomes something slightly different while remaining fundamentally the same. You're aware of the ice's temperature, how it varies slightly with depth. Near the surface, the ice is colder, affected more by the air temperature above. The surface ice might be -20 or -30 degrees Celsius in winter. warming to near zero in summer at the very top where melting can occur. At the glacier's bed, far below you, the ice is slightly warmer, affected by geothermal heat from the earth and by the friction of the glacier sliding over bedrock. The bedrock is warmer than the ice, warmer than the air, and it conducts heat upward into the ice above it. The temperature at the bed might be near the pressure melting point, the temperature at which ice melts under pressure, which is slightly below zero. You're somewhere in between these extremes, at a temperature several degrees below freezing, perhaps -10 or -15 Celsius. Cold enough to keep the ice solid, stable, permanent, strong enough to flow plastically without melting. The flow patterns in the ice are complex, three-dimensional, beautiful in their complexity. The ice doesn't just move downslope in a simple straight line. It also flows outward slightly, spreading under its own weight, trying to flatten itself. And it flows vertically, some layers rising relative to others, some sinking. The patterns depend on the thickness of the ice, the slope of the valley, the shape of the bedrock below, the temperature, a dozen other factors. You're caught in these flows, being carried along in a trajectory that's curving slowly, descending through the glacier's body as you travel down the valley. It's a complex dance, choreographed by physics and glaciology, but so slow that from any single moment to the next, you appear motionless. Only over years and decades do the patterns become apparent. Around you, the ice holds its compressed history. You can sense, if you pay attention, the layers above and below, how they differ slightly in density, in crystal size, in the concentration of air bubbles. Each layer is a year of snowfall, a season of accumulation, and they stack like pages in a book, recording the glacier's history. You're one of these pages, moving through the others, all of them flowing together down the valley. The pressure remains constant, the weight of ice above balanced by the strength of the ice around you. This pressure is what allows the glacier to flow, what makes the ice plastic enough to deform without breaking. Without this pressure, the ice would be brittle, fracturing instead of flowing. But under the weight of hundreds of meters of overlying ice, the material can creep, can slide slowly along crystal boundaries, can reorganize itself continuously. Time passes, and you don't count it. More decades, perhaps another century, the glacier's flow has carried you farther down the valley, kilometers from where you first entered the ice. The elevation is lower now, though not by much. The glacier descends its valley at a gentle grade, dropping perhaps 100 meters for every kilometer of horizontal distance. But that descent is enough to keep the ice moving, to keep you moving with it, drawn downslope by gravity's patient pull. You're aware, sometimes, of the glacier's boundaries. To your sides, far away, are the valley walls, solid rock that constrains the ice's flow. The ice near those walls moves more slowly, held back by friction against the rock. The ice in the center, where you are, moves faster, less constrained. This creates shear zones, regions where ice is moving at different speeds, and these zones extend through the glacier's full depth, creating internal stress patterns that contribute to the flow. The glacier's surface, far above you, is shaped by its flow. Crevasses form where the ice stretches over bedrock bumps, cracks opening in the brittle surface ice, while the deeper plastic ice continues to flow smoothly. You're too deep to be affected by these surface features, but you're aware of them distantly. the way they create variations in the stress field that extends through the entire glacier. The surface is always changing, always reorganizing itself, while the depths where you rest remain stable, consistent. And still the flow continues, day after day, year after year, century after century. The glacier is patient beyond measure, flowing at a pace that would seem like stillness to any observer watching for less than years at a time. But the flow is real, is constant, is inevitable. You're being carried along, traveling through the ice, journeying down the mountain valley at this gentle, unhurried pace. The blue light pulses gently with the seasons, brightening slightly in summer, dimming in winter, though the variations are subtle. This light is your constant companion, the glow that fills your world, created by the way the ice absorbs and scatters sunlight, filtering down from above. It's beautiful. This blue, peaceful and calming, a color that exists nowhere else in quite this way. You've been traveling through the glacier for a very long time now, perhaps several centuries, perhaps longer. The exact time is unknowable, lost in the slow passage of decades and centuries. The slow flow has carried you many kilometers from where you first fell as snow, down from the high peaks, down through the valley, traveling at that patient pace that seems to exist outside of normal time. The glacier's motion has brought you down the valley, lowering your elevation gradually, moving you toward warmer regions, though the glacier itself remains deeply cold, preserving you in its frozen matrix. The air above the glacier's surface is warmer now than it was at the heights where you began, but the ice itself is still frozen solid, still moving slowly, still patient and eternal. And now something interesting is beginning to happen, something that marks a transition in your journey. You've been deep in the glacier for so long, traveling through that profound blue world, but gradually, very gradually, you're beginning to rise. Not because you're moving upward through the ice, not because you're swimming or floating upward, but because the glacier's flow is bringing you toward the surface. The ice around you is flowing in complex curves, complex three-dimensional patterns, and in the lower reaches of the glacier, where you are now, the flow patterns cause deeper ice to rise up, to arc toward the surface as the glacier thins in its final kilometers. It's a natural consequence of the ice flow dynamics, of mass conservation, of the glacier losing ice at its terminus and needing to bring deeper ice up to replace what's lost. This rising is as slow as everything else in the glacier, measured in centimeters per year, perhaps a meter or two per decade, but it's happening, constant and patient, ongoing without pause. Each year you're a little closer to the surface, a little nearer to the sun, a little closer to the boundary between ice and air. The ice above you is thinning gradually as the glacier loses mass in its lower reaches, melting faster than it's replenished by flow from above. The glacier is thinning, becoming shallower, approaching its terminus. You're part of this process now, being brought slowly toward the light, toward the eventual end of your journey as ice. The blue around you is changing subtly. It's still the deep azure of glacier ice, still that profound color that has surrounded you for so long, but it's brightening slightly, becoming more luminous. The light is a little stronger now that there's less ice between you and the surface. You can sense the change, the way the glow is intensifying year by year, decade by decade. It's subtle, not dramatic, but it's real. The surface is approaching. Though it's still far above, still many meters of ice away, still many years of rising in your future. The ice you're in is very old now, ancient by any measure. The crystals around you are large, well formed, the structure of the ice stable and unchanging, organized and solid. The ice has reached its final form, the form it will maintain until it melts. The air bubbles you've carried since your arrival centuries ago are still present, still intact, tiny spheres of atmosphere from a time long past. These bubbles are under great pressure, compressed by all the ice above, the air inside them squeezed to many times its normal density, but they remain intact, preserved in the ice's embrace. They've traveled with you through the entire journey, from the surface to the depths, and now back toward the surface. Faithful companions through centuries of slow flow. You're aware of the glacier thinning around you, becoming shallower. The surface is closer, yes, but the bedrock below is also approaching, coming up to meet the thinning ice. The glacier in this region is perhaps only 100 meters thick now, perhaps less, compared to the hundreds of meters it was in the upper valley. The ice is being squeezed between the approaching surface and the solid rock below, and this changes the flow patterns, modifies the stress fields, accelerates the upwelling that's bringing you toward the light. The flow patterns are converging, squeezing, focusing the ice flow into a narrower, shallower channel. The temperature around you is beginning to change very slightly, warming by a degree or two. You're still well below freezing. The ice is solid, stable, strong, but the temperature is a fraction of a degree warmer than it was in the glacier's upper reaches. This is because you're at a lower elevation now, in a region where the air above is slightly less cold, where summer sun is slightly stronger, where the climate is marginally warmer. But the changes are subtle, barely perceptible. The ice remains frozen, will remain frozen for many years yet. A few degrees of temperature change doesn't threaten ice. That's many degrees below freezing. Time continues its passage, and you continue to rise. The flow carries you upward and forward simultaneously, both at once, tracing a curved path through the ice. You're ascending through the layers now, passing by ice that's younger than you, ice that fell as snow more recently, ice that's still making its own journey down through the névé toward the depths. But you've already made that journey. You've been to the depths, spent centuries there, and now you're on the return path, rising toward the surface you left so long ago. The journey is circular in a sense, a great loop through time and ice, down into the depths, and back up toward the light. The light continues to brighten. You can sense it more clearly now. The way the blue is becoming more luminous, more intense. During the summer months, the light is strong enough that you can almost sense the sun's warmth, though it doesn't reach down to where you are. Not yet. During winter, the light dims and the cold deepens slightly, but these variations are becoming more pronounced now that you're closer to the surface. Around you, the ice is still flowing, still moving down valley, but your personal trajectory is upward now, rising toward the surface as the glacier's flow patterns bring ancient ice up from the depths. Other ice flows around you, some of it heading deeper, some rising like you, all of it part of the complex three-dimensional flow that characterizes the glacier's movement. The ice is like a slow river, with currents and eddies, all moving at geological pace. You're aware of changes in the ice's structure around you. Near the surface, where the ice experiences more stress, more temperature variation, the crystal structure is different, more irregular. But you're not there yet. You're still in the stable interior, the region where the ice has settled into its final form, where the crystals are large and well organized, where everything is calm and predictable. The rising continues, year after year, century fading into century. You're perhaps 50 meters below the surface now, perhaps less. The ice above you is still substantial, still thick enough to protect you from direct sunlight, but it's thinning. Each year brings you closer to the world of air and light, closer to the end of your journey through the glacier. The blue light is beautiful now, intense and pure, filling everything with its glow. This is the light that gives glaciers their characteristic color, the light that creates those stunning blue ice caves and crevasses, the light that draws photographers and visitors to wonder at the ice's beauty. You're inside that beauty now, experiencing it from within, surrounded by the purest blue imaginable. And still you rise, drawn upward by the glacier's flow, approaching the surface slowly but inevitably. The journey that began centuries ago when you fell as a snowflake is moving toward its conclusion. You've traveled through time and ice, compressed and preserved, flowing and patient. And now you're beginning the final phase, the return to the surface, the transition from solid ice back to liquid water. You're close to the surface now, perhaps only 20 or 30 meters of ice above you, perhaps even less. The light is strong, the blue intense and brilliant during the summer months, almost glowing with the intensity of sunlight filtered through ice. You can sense the seasons clearly now, much more clearly than you could in the depths. The way the summer sun warms the ice above, the way winter cold penetrates down, creating temperature cycles that are now significant enough to feel. The temperature around you varies by several degrees through the year, rising towards 0 in summer, dropping back down to -10 or 15 in winter, though it still remains below freezing throughout the year, still keeps the ice solid. But the variation is notable, a cycling that marks time in a way the depths never did. But you're approaching the melt zone, the region where summer warmth can penetrate, where ice begins to transition back to water. You're not there yet, not quite, but you're getting closer each year as you rise through the glacier's final meters. As the surface approaches from above, the flow continues to carry you upward and forward, bringing you toward the glacier's terminus, the place where the ice finally ends, where centuries of frozen existence give way to flowing water once more. The structure of the ice around you is changing now that you're near the surface. Near the surface, the ice experiences more stress, more temperature variation, more exposure to the cycles of freezing and melting that happen at the boundary between ice and air. And this creates different crystal patterns, different structures. The large, uniform crystals of the glacier's depths are being replaced by smaller, more irregular structures. Ice that's been affected by temperature cycles, by surface stresses, by the presence of meltwater percolating down from above. The ice is still solid, still strong, but it's different, marked by its proximity to the surface world, shaped by forces that don't reach the depths. You can sense, now, the presence of water. During the summer, meltwater from the surface percolates down into the ice, finding channels and pathways, flowing through cracks and along crystal boundaries, exploring the ice's interior. This water is still ice, cold, just barely liquid, literally at 0 degrees Celsius, the temperature at which water and ice coexist. But it's there, moving through the glacier in complex networks of channels and passages, some large enough to walk through if you were human, sized, some microscopic, all of them carrying meltwater down through the ice toward the glacier's bed. You're not in contact with this flowing water yet, not directly, but you can sense its presence, the way it changes the ice around you, the way it creates channels and voids in the otherwise solid matrix, the way it signals the approaching transition. The air bubbles you've carried for so long are beginning to connect with the surface through these meltwater channels. When water flows past them, when a channel intersects a bubble, it can dissolve the compressed air, carrying it away dissolved in the water, eventually releasing it to the atmosphere when the water emerges at the surface or at the glacier's terminus. Some of your air bubbles are disappearing this way, their ancient atmosphere returning to the modern world, mixing with today's air, the oxygen and nitrogen and carbon dioxide that was trapped when you fell as snow, that has been preserved in ice for centuries, is being released, rejoining the atmosphere. But many bubbles remain, still trapped in the ice matrix, still waiting for their final release when you melt completely. Time passes, and you continue to rise, continue to approach the surface. You're perhaps 10 meters below the surface now, in the active layer where seasonal temperature changes are significant, where the ice's behavior is different from the deep glacier. During winter, this ice freezes solid and hard, as cold as the glacier's depths, perhaps colder. The temperature might drop to -20 or -30 Celsius, and everything becomes brittle and frozen, locked solid until spring. During summer, it warms close to freezing, warming from below as warmer ice rises, and from above as the sun beats down on the surface. The ice approaches 0 degrees, approaches the melting point, though most of it remains solid. At the very surface, though, melting is happening, ice turning to water and flowing away. And each summer, the surface drops a little as ice is converted to meltwater. Each summer brings you closer to that surface, closer to the melting zone, closer to the end of your existence as ice. The flow is still carrying you forward, still moving you down glacier, but now upward more than downward, bringing you toward the glacier's end. You've traveled the full length of the glacier now, from the high peaks where you first fell to the lower valley where the terminus lies. The journey has taken centuries, multiple human lifetimes, but time has been patient, and so has the ice. The ice around you is different now than it was in the depths. It's less pure, containing sediment and rock debris picked up from the glacier's bed, material that's been carried along with the ice, frozen into it. Part of the glacier's load. This debris makes the ice darker, less blue, more gray or brown in places. The beautiful, pure blue of the glacier's heart is being replaced by a more weathered appearance. Ice that's been worked on by melt and flow and contact with rock. Ice that's nearing the end of its frozen existence. The debris ranges from fine rock flour, particles so small they're like powder, to larger pebbles and stones, all frozen into the ice matrix. You can sense the glacier's terminus now, getting closer. The place where the ice finally gives way to rock and soil, where meltwater streams emerge from beneath the ice, where the glacier deposits its load of sediment, carrying away the glacier's substance. The terminus is a dynamic place, advancing in cold years when the glacier gains mass, retreating in warm years when melting exceeds accumulation. You're being carried toward this boundary, toward the transition zone where ice becomes water, where your centuries long journey through the glacier reaches its conclusion. The light above is changing quality. During summer now, you can sense direct sunlight, not just scattered blue light, but actual solar radiation penetrating through the thinning ice. The warmth is real, tangible, physical, bringing the ice closer to its melting point. The radiation carries energy, and that energy is absorbed by the ice, warming it degree by degree. During the height of summer, the temperature around you approaches 0 degrees Celsius, dancing near the threshold between solid and liquid, hovering at that boundary where water can exist in either form. The ice wants to melt, the warmth encouraging it, but the cold of the glacier's interior holds it back, keeps most of it solid. Only the very surface, the topmost layer, melts readily, turning to water and flowing away. And then, gradually, imperceptibly at first, you're beginning to melt. Not all at once, not dramatically, not in a sudden transformation, but slowly, molecule by molecule, bond by bond. The ice around you is transitioning. Some crystals holding on to their solid form, while others release their bonds and flow as water. The solid structure that held you for so long is loosening, softening, becoming less rigid. You're part of this transition, feeling your structure change, feeling the solid lattice beginning to loosen, feeling the bonds between molecules stretching and breaking. It's not painful. Ice doesn't feel pain, but it's a profound change, a fundamental transformation from one state to another. The process happens in layers, from the outside in. The surface melts first, the ice exposed directly to sun and air turning to water. Then the layer below that, then the next layer. You're waiting your turn, still mostly solid, still holding your form, but feeling the changes around you, feeling the approach of your own transition. The melting is selective at first, happening faster where the sun shines directly, slower in shadows, faster where the ice is thinner, slower where it's thick. But gradually the melting spreads, encompasses more ice, includes you. The air bubbles you've carried for so long are being released now, their imprisonment ending. As the ice around them melts, the bubbles expand, the compressed air pushing outward, seeking freedom. They rise through the remaining ice and through the meltwater, tiny bubbles carrying atmosphere from centuries past back to the present day. Some of these bubbles fizz gently as they emerge, a soft sound that's the glacier sighing its ancient breath, releasing air that was trapped when you fell as snow so long ago. The sound is subtle, barely audible, but it's there, a whisper of the past rejoining the present. The melting continues through the summer, accelerating as the season progresses, as the sun climbs higher, as the days grow longer and warmer. And you're transitioning fully now, becoming water, flowing in liquid. The solid structure that held you for so long is dissolving, releasing you back to liquid form. Around you, other ice is melting too, all of it becoming water together, joining in streams and rivulets that flow across the glacier's surface, collecting in channels, moving toward the glacier's edge. You're part of this flow now, liquid instead of solid, moving freely instead of being locked in place, traveling quickly instead of at that patient geological pace. You're water now, fully liquid, flowing across the glacier's surface in a small stream with thousands of other droplets, all of you recently released from the ice. The journey through solid form is complete, ended. You spent centuries as ice, compressed and preserved and flowing slowly through the glacier, traveling from the high peaks to the lower valleys at a pace measured in meters per year. But now you're water again, moving fast compared to the ice, flowing across the surface toward the glacier's terminus. The change is profound, fundamental. Where once you moved imperceptibly, now you rush and flow. Where once you were bound in a solid matrix, now you're free, liquid, mobile. The sunlight is bright on the ice around you, making everything sparkle and shine. The surface is rough, textured with small ridges and channels carved by flowing water, by the action of melt and refreezing, by the cycles of seasons. You follow one of these channels, moving with the current, joining with other meltwater streams, growing into a larger flow. The journey is quick now, nothing like the patient centuries in the ice. Within hours, just hours instead of centuries, you're approaching the glacier's edge, traveling more distance in this single day than you might have traveled in a year as ice. You can see it ahead, the terminus, the place where the ice finally ends. The glacier's front is rough and irregular, uneven, melting back faster in some places than others, creating caves and channels where water flows out from beneath the ice. Some areas of the terminus are steep, almost vertical walls of ice, while others slope more gently. The ice here is dirty, filled with rock debris, stained with sediment accumulated over the glacier's journey. This is the glacier's working edge, where it grinds against bedrock, where it deposits the material it's carried from high in the mountains, where it releases its load of sediment and water. You're heading toward one of these channels, carried by the current, moving from the glacier's surface into its interior, down through cracks and passages toward the ice's base. The ice around you is darker here, much darker than the pure blue of the glacier's heart. It's filled with rock debris, sediment, dust, everything the glacier has picked up during its slow journey through the valley. This debris makes the ice appear gray, brown, even black in places where the concentration is highest, stained with sediment, marked by time and flow and contact with the earth. You flow through this environment, between ice and rock, part of the water that's lubricating the glacier's base, helping it slide forward in its slow advance, part of the hydraulic system that allows glaciers to flow faster than they otherwise could. And then you emerge, flowing out from beneath the glacier's terminus into open air, into bright sunlight, into the world beyond the ice. The transition is sudden, dramatic after centuries of slow change. You're part of a meltwater stream now, flowing across glacial till, across the rocky debris field left by the glacier's retreat, across ground that was covered by ice just years or decades ago. The water around you is milky with rock flour, the fine sediment created by the glacier's grinding motion, particles so small they stay suspended in the water, giving it a cloudy appearance. But it's flowing freely, energetically, moving down valley away from the ice, carrying you along. You look back, and you can see the glacier rising behind you, the ice climbing back up the valley toward the high peaks where your journey began. The glacier is vast and white and blue, patient and permanent, seeming, though you know now that it's always flowing, always changing, always moving ice from the heights to the depths and back to the surface. The journey you just completed, that took centuries to unfold, is being repeated by countless other snowflakes, all of them falling, compressing, flowing, melting, returning to water. The stream carries you forward, away from the glacier, down through the valley. You're moving quickly now, over rocks and through pools, joining with other streams, growing larger, The mountains rise around you, and the sky is wide and blue above. You're water in motion, flowing toward rivers, toward the ocean eventually, toward the vast cycle that will evaporate you back into the atmosphere, where you might fall as rain or snow again, beginning a new journey. But for now, you flow, and the glacier remains behind you, patient and blue, grinding slowly through its valley, carrying new snow down through its depths, continuing its ancient rhythm. The ice moves at the speed of stone, at the speed of deep time, preserving and transforming and releasing, over and over, in a cycle as old as the mountains themselves. And you flow onward, carrying with you the memory of blue light and patient pressure, of centuries held in ice, of a journey through time that moved so slowly it seemed not to move at all. The glacier is behind you, but its essence is within you. The knowledge of that deep, patient cold, that ancient, slow flow. You're water now, but you were ice, and the ice was snow, and the snow was vapor, and the cycle continues, endless and peaceful, flowing through time like the glacier flows through its valley. The journey is complete. The journey continues. Time moves differently depending on your form, but the movement never truly stops. You flow now, but somewhere high in the mountains, new snow is falling, beginning its own patient journey through the ice. And the glacier remains, blue and vast and slow, holding its secrets, flowing its ancient flow, patient as stone, endless as time.